get into my homily, I have to warn people, the first part of it is a little gross, but I figure it's Halloween. So nothing more than what we would see on Halloween things here today. It's also a little bit of a hard subject, and I'd like to start off. I'll just read this through my homily here. So, imagine living 70 years ago when you have a man in a white doctor's coat and another young woman with Down syndrome. The man tells you you must participate in a study for the good of science. If you do not agree, he tells you your life will be very hard, but you have a choice. Now imagine you're off the shores of Africa, not too many years ago, and you are told to carry out a study on beagles for the good of science. You have to put a basket over the head of the beagles and observe the threshold pain as sandflies eat their heads until they die. Now imagine in the early 1970s, you are doing some research to help cure diseases. You are given parts of dead babies that were aborted, and you need to save as many parts and cells as possible so that they can be used, so that they in turn can be used in vaccinations, medicines, skincare products, and used for research, even for food. Isn't that just gross? But that's Halloween, right? Brothers and sisters, all these grotesque events have happened. Dr. Mengele in the Nazi regime was a man in the white doctor's coat. The study on beagles were done by reputable pharmaceutical companies. Some of these pharmaceutical companies are the same companies that claim to benefit humanity with the death of over 60 million babies in our country. Over 60 million. That's more than Hitler. Coming to the end of Pro-Life Month, I have an obligation to remind myself and anybody who has ears to hear of the atrocity of abortion. Today's example that we experience, I feel, is very apropos. The experience we're all experiencing today. How quickly we forget that when a certain class of people get relegated as non-persons, slaughter is about to happen. It happened to the Jewish people. It happened to the black people of this nation. It happened throughout all of humanity, nearly in every land. It is happening today because babies in the womb have been put under the same classification since Roe versus Wade. It has been a long time living with this mentality in our society. It has affected how we think. Our schools teach from kindergarten through college. Can you name any public media that would stand against abortion? Few and far between. Yet this mentality has become the dogma of the world. Some people even think parents are terrorists, thereby calling them essentially non-persons. Both the socialist Nazi regime and the communist regimes throughout the world have used these tactics to dehumanize citizens against each other, that they could pick them off one by one. It started with babies. Last year, it It was our first responders, now parents. Who's next? How? As for the babies, where it started in abortion, the example of fetal cell lines I have given, you will find in this information on the website for COG for Life, Children of God for Life. You will also find in it the bulletin. COG for Life is approved by the USCCB, the United States Catholic Council of Bishops. You will find a lot of information there about the statements of the Vatican, the bishops, and the information about the cell lines from aborted babies used for our current shots offered, the COVID shots. It is a Catholic organization, but it's put together really, and the information is there from scientists. You will find this website a very professional and fact-based. In fact, if there is any discrepancy between what I say and the information they have, assume that I made the mistake. But what is a cell line? I'm going to give you the simple answer. They are cells that were grown from other cells to make more cells, possibly of the same genome. So think about cell division. That's all it is. Just making cells divide. It's not cloning. It's just making cells divide. You can take cells from a rabbit or even cells from the placenta at birth and make them multiply. This is a valid and good use of cell lines. This is what scientists do for adult stem cell research, which 15 years ago, when I went more in depth in studying this, it showed over 100 cures 15 years ago for adult stem cells. Embryonic is another thing. It's actually literally drove people mad, but I don't have the time to go through that. It's what we use in adult stem cell research and vaccinations legitimately. Japan has been using cell lines from rabbits for vaccinations successfully for years. There is no need for the cell lines of babies. And in fact, the last 2 years, the flu shot hasn't had it, but the years prior to that did. However, when you go into your bulletin and you receive your bulletin, you will receive this chart. This is part of COG for Life, Children of God for Life. Put this together in this spreadsheet. In it, you'll see the list of the various cell lines from babies that are commonly used, not all. In here, you will see with the arrow, HEK 293. That's the cell line that they are using for Pfizer, Moderna, and the Johnson & Johnson, used in the COVID shots for their research. The Merck, I don't know which cell lines, but I'm almost guaranteed that that will be. And then there's another one coming up in December, which sounds like does use the cell lines for research. Probably this one, for some reason, they like to use this cell line for vaccinations. The HEK 293, in that cell line, we see it probably comes from a female, right here on the chart. And it was aborted around 1972, also in the chart. From the Netherlands, when you go to the far right and you see the details of this baby. They planned to do this by using the kidney for the cell lines. Think about this. It's 1972, long time ago. Why did they take out the kidney? Why did they need that? They knew what this was for. They knew what this was for. This is planned. They plan to do this by using the kidney for the cell lines. So the fact is that these shots were developed by using these cell lines of HEK 293. I'll call her Sydney because it rhymes with kidney. The kidney she involuntarily donated. You see, Sydney is a human being and is therefore a human person. This is why so many people are so horrified by such a proposition to accept such mad scientism. They refuse it precisely because they care. How many times does a person's body and their DNA need to be controlled and manipulated before we stop such abuse? It has been since 1972 that Sydney's body has not been able to rest in peace. I must also say that anybody who has taken the shot are not sinning by doing so. I'm not going there. The Propagation of the Doctrine of the Faith in December of 2020, statement from the Vatican, says, where irreproachable COVID-19 vaccines are not available, where cells, when various types of vaccines are distributed in the same country, health authorities do not allow citizens to choose the vaccine with which to be inoculated, it is morally acceptable to receive the COVID-19 vaccines. You see, it is the authorities that are at fault, and they will be judged. There is no need to use baby cell lines. The Church and the Pope have been clear that any person may receive the shot, but a person may also decline to do so. Each choice has its own risks. It is a complicated mess and by design. No person is to judge another by what they have decided on this issue. We are all human persons. As for who's next, we started with babies. The important thing, we support the dignity of each other. We need also to demand our authorities that these designs be stopped. Demand our authorities that cell lines from babies never be used again. Let these babies rest in peace. Yet they can't even let a person with a different conscience rest. I'll remind you of the Catholic Church's teaching on conscience. This is from the Second Vatican Council, Gaudium et Spes, paragraph 16. And I encourage anybody who doubts the Second Vatican Council to read this because it's truthful and it's beautiful. Gaudium et Spes says about conscience, in the depths of his conscience, man detects a law which he does not impose upon himself. It's not about a guy just thinking about what do I want to do. He does not impose it upon himself, but which holds him to obedience, always summoning him to love good and avoid evil. The voice of conscience, when necessary, speaks to his heart. You see, it's man praying to God individually. It's not about what a religion teaches. It's about each and every person praying to God, discerning God's holy will. And God speaks to that heart. Do this, shun that. For man has in his heart a law written by God. To obey this is the very dignity of man. According to it, he will be judged. Conscience is the most secret core and sanctuary of man. There he is alone with God, whose voice echoes in his depths. In a wonderful manner, conscience reveals that law, which is fulfilled by love of God and neighbor, the very message of this gospel reading today. In fidelity to conscience, Christians are joined with the rest of the men, the rest of the world, all peoples throughout the world, in the search for truth and for the genuine solution to the numerous problems which arise in the life of individuals from social relationships. Hence, the more right conscience holds sway, the more persons and groups turn aside from blind choice and strive to be guided by objective norms of morality. Conscience frequently errs from invincible ignorance without losing its dignity. The same cannot be said for a man who cares but little for truth and goodness, or for a conscience which by degrees grows practically slightless as a result of habitual sin. This is a great reading. I can give a series of talks on that last paragraph. But the Catechism of the Catholic Church states poignantly in paragraph 1782 on the whole section. I would encourage you to read the whole section on conscience. But this paragraph is very poignant. Paragraph number 1782. Man has the right to act in conscience and in freedom so as personally to make moral decisions. He must not be forced to act contrary to his conscience, nor must he be prevented from acting according to his conscience, especially in religious matters. It would be a crime to humanity. One must not be forced, especially when there are such shots as controversial as the ones offered. But the controversial part is not just the abortions that are attached to them, but there is an ever-growing pile of evidence as to the efficacy of these shots and the lack thereof. The question is, are they actually medicinal? The Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith. This is a question. This is a reason why I say this. Doctors, nurses, paramedics are refusing this shot for a reason, and it's not because they're going off crazy. These are professionals. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith has stated it must be considered that in such a case, all vaccinations recognized as clinically safe and effective can be used in good conscience. There is still debate among professionals as to the safety and effectiveness. This has not been answered clearly. It has still not gone through its full process. A proposition between two evils is not a choice born from free conscience. It is a controlling of peoples to strip them of their dignity. Remember that dignity I talked about in free conscience, Gaudium et Spes, that I just referred to. It would strip them of their dignity and their ability to maintain a relationship with God and their fellow man, the very message of this gospel reading. But God will restore that dignity. We are not without hope. Whether it is the dignity that was stolen from the slaves over 100 years ago, the Jewish people of World War II, Sydney, or any person forced against their will, God will judge the ones who do such atrocities. For those who have suffered or may suffer for such a cause as human dignity, we have a promise by God. This promise will be fulfilled. The dignity of such persons is to be in the bosom of Abraham. But for those who are the perpetrators of such lies, deceit, control, and manipulation, you can run, but you can't hide. No money can buy life after death. To the eternal flames will they go, without a person to dip their finger into the water to cool their tongue. We look forward to that day when the finger of God puts such evil in its rightful place.